On Friday's show, I was joking about an article that just appeared in The Atlantic. It's written by a respected writer, Anne Applebaum, called The My Pillow Guy Really Could Destroy Democracy. And of course I quipped, hey, let's help Mike Lindell destroy democracy by, taking him up on his special on his towels. But then I thought to myself, instead of just dismissing the article, let me sort of take a look. Let me see what they're saying. How is it possible that an entrepreneur like Lindell really could destroy American democracy? Is American democracy so fragile over the past 200 years that one guy in the Midwest can overturn it, apparently all by himself? So the article begins, and I'm going to sort of read a few lines and comment on them to get to the heart of what Anne Applebaum is saying. She starts off by saying, when you think about the destruction of democracy, you think it's going to be done by some rogue general or some jackbooted thug leading a group of, quote, a horde of men in white sheets. And she goes, well, this guy, Mike Lindell, is not like that. And she actually captures an aspect of his personality. She says he, quote, laughs good-naturedly when jokes are made at his expense. So he's genuinely a self-deprecating guy. Quote, he's a man who will talk to anyone willing to listen, and many aren't. So this is a guy who's open to conversation. He's, quote, a philanthropist. He's a good boss. He's a patriot. Wow. And yet, she says, and this is the conclusion of her paragraph, he, quote, well, may be doing more damage to American democracy than anyone since Jefferson Davis. Now, wow. I mean, for this guy to be put into this kind of historical context, in some ways, I suppose it's kind of an honor to give Mike Lindell this kind of importance. Now, she goes on, and there are a few kind of familiar invocations of history. She says, it may seem odd that an entrepreneur could possibly have all this kind of a negative effect, but she goes, think of Olof Ashberg, the Swedish banker who helped finance the Bolshevik Revolution, or Henry Ford, whose infamous anti-Semitic tract, The International Jew, was widely read in Nazi Germany. So she's putting Lindell in the category of these business figures who contributed to the rise of Bolshevism in Russia and, of course, the rise of fascism in Germany. So how does Lindell fit this pattern? Let's read on. Quote, he is helping create profound distrust in the American electoral system, aha, in the American political system, aha, and in the American public health system, ultimately in American democracy. Now, this, of course, is the heart of the matter. But let's think about it for a minute. Is it that the American people, all of us, have a robust trust in the health system and American democracy and in the elections, and then along comes this sales guy, Lindell, and he is the one who convinces us, oh, wow, there was a lot of problems in the election. Oh, wow, there's a lot of politicization of COVID. Oh, wow, American democracy has, you may say, at the least two faces, in that it treats people on one side of the aisle differently from the other side of the aisle. Here's my point. We have come to these conclusions long before Lindell. Lots of people believe these things, and I would argue believe them for very good reason. Our doubts about American democracy is based on the observation of the way that American democracy plays out. Isn't American democracy based on an affirmation of free speech? Where's your free speech? Where's mine? Isn't it based on religious freedom? Where's your religious freedom? Where's mine? Isn't it based upon kind of a public and honest auditing and accounting of votes? When has that ever occurred? Isn't it based upon an observation? We look around, we see the way in which the COVID-19 has been politicized from start to finish. They give you one piece of advice here and another piece of advice there. Investigation into the origins of the virus ruthlessly suppressed for over a year. So these are the reasons why people have distrust. Our institutions, you may say, have earned their distrust. So what is Lindell doing? He's merely boldly echoing these sentiments. And the reason people are responding is that that's how they feel anyway. Now, Anne Applebaum goes on to say that even Mike Lindell is talking about suppression of freedom. She says, I don't see anyone arresting you. And when she's talking about him being canceled by retailers, thrown off social media, she goes, quote, plenty of Americans oppose Lindell's open promotion of both election and vaccine conspiracy theories. And here is where I think this article becomes deeply dishonest. Because Anne Applebaum knows that the reason that Mike Lindell is canceled by retailers is not due to some public uprising of people who voluntarily decide, hey, listen, I'm not going to go to Bed Bath & Beyond and buy his products. That's not what happened. There's an organized campaign by the left to get these retailers to cancel him. And then, of course, the case for free speech doesn't depend on whether or not Americans believe that Mike Lindell is engaging in conspiracy theories. The First Amendment protects conspiracy theories. People, as part of free speech, are allowed to indulge in conspiracy theories. There is no kind of conspiracy theory exception to the First Amendment. So I find it a little bit disturbing and shocking that someone of Anne Applebaum's caliber, she's written, by the way, good books about the Soviet Union and about history, nevertheless gets drawn into this woke culture in which she sees even censorship as a kind of a healthy public reaction to misinformation being allegedly put out by Mike Lindell. And then when we get to the claims that Lindell himself makes, she doesn't even bother to check them out. She, in fact, confesses that she's not that familiar with them. She's not in a position to evaluate any evidence. She merely puts in a single phone call to Chris Krebs. By the way, this is a figure whose name you might recognize. This is the guy who runs the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. This is a guy, by the way, who testified the election was the most secure ever. And this is Krebs's reaction. It's all part of the grift. In other words, it's all part of just emotional manipulation. And that's it. As if to say that that is a sufficient answer to all the concerns that have been raised on this podcast and elsewhere about the breakdown of our public institutions. I think that this sort of article, read carefully, doesn't reflect badly on Lindell so much as it reflects badly on its creator, Anne Applebaum, and the magazine that published it, the once reputable Atlantic Monthly.